Hello everyone. On today's flight, we're going to take a little short trip from Manchester, New Hampshire up to Portland, Maine. The interesting thing about this flight today is the fact that the weather is not going to be terribly good, so it's going to give us a great opportunity to practice a little bit of instrument flying as well as flying a hold. So I'm going to quickly scoot over to SkyVector, which is an absolutely great resource for this, to actually go ahead and figure out what we're going to do. So we're going to go ahead and take off. We're going to proceed at a course of about 66. I'm actually going to fly at a slightly steeper course so I can actually intersect this radial a little bit sooner. Probably going to come, let's say about there and see what that comes out to be. 77, that sounds pretty good. So I aim for about 77, maybe even 80 degrees, something along those lines to go ahead and get us a little closer. After we do that, then we're going to go ahead and scoot up to Kennebunk, which is a VOR station. Then we're going to fly up, intersect the ILS, and then we're going to go ahead and land. Now, to make things extra complicated today, I'm actually going to take a look at our ILS, and you can see there's quite a bit of things going on here at this time. We have the Kennebunk VOR station, which is going to be right here, and we're actually going to be flying from this using the 30-degree radial, crossing and actually flying this hold. Now, holds are kind of an interesting way of sort of controlling traffic, and this airplane makes holds a little bit more exciting than some other aircraft may be, because you don't have quite the control that you might want. We could certainly hand fly the holds, but that gets a little bit complicated, especially with everything that's going to be going on. So what we need to do is, as we're thinking about this hold, we need to figure out how to get to this point and enter into this little racetrack pattern. Now, if this line were kind of hanging out over here-ish, we could actually just fly right to the waypoint and then whip around like that. Unfortunately, if you were to actually grab your calculator and take the heading we need to be on minus the incoming heading, you'll notice this is going to be an 80-degree angle. If this angle were less than 70 degrees or less, you could actually directly enter and fly right to that point. But since it isn't, we're going to have to enter what they call a parallel hold. To do this, we're going to fly along this radial, get to this point, take a left turn, fly basically back course, then kind of come in right about here, swing around, re-intercept the ILS localizer, cross that waypoint, and then enter into our racetrack pattern. After completing a single revolution of this, we're then going to reacquire the localizer and the glide slope, and then scoot back down onto the ground. Weather forecast right up there at this particular time, if you take a look real quick, this is indicating no wind, which there was a little bit of wind earlier, but we're still going to use the same runway. You can also see that we've got a bit of overcast, there's a little bit of broken clouds as well, and the altimeter is 3014. Okay, so let's go ahead and get everything set up. We're already in landing configuration. The aircraft has already started. Everybody's been loaded up in the back. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set my frequency to this VOR station. It's going to be 117.10. So I go to 117. Go ahead and set this to 10. On the right-hand side, I've already set the ILS frequency. So you're actually going to see in a little while that we'll be able to figure out roughly how far away we are from the end of the runway. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch both of these to miles. Now, one of those things I've learned from doing this a few times is the fact that if you leave this in kilometers, you're going to forget, and you're going to be looking down here at the DME going, oh no, what have I done? When you realize that you're, half the distance you need to be to get to your destination. It happens to everybody. We're going to leave the NVU out today, and we're also actually going to leave out the yokes, which you can get rid of by pressing Shift F9. It's kind of a handy thing. We're going to be using our weather radar 2 today to see if there's any radar in the direction, as well as a combination of the course steer option and the VOR following option. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in our initial course. Again, I said about 70 degrees seems to work pretty well. That works well here. By the way, this instrument is utterly useless if you didn't take the time to set it up on the overhead earlier. I tried a flight once and was very confused why I couldn't figure out which side of the radial I was operating on at a given moment. So kind of watch out for that. So this guy's going to be set to initial course. Basically, we're going to take off and fly mostly runway heading. Afterwards, if you remember, we're going to be flying the 030 radial once we get to Kennebunk. So that's 30. We got to come down here and also set it. I've already preset it in there. And then for the actual landing, it's going to be a 110-degree course. So I'll set that there, and I'm going to go ahead and swing over here as well and set that here, just so that I can kind of remember it so I don't have to think about it once I get there. 110 degrees on the nose. Lovely. Okay, so everything is ready to go. We're ready to take off. This flight's going to take about a half an hour by the time we lift off to when we get on the ground. But again, that's not too bad as far as flights go. Our cruising altitude today is going to be a very mild 2,000 meters because it really doesn't make sense to go that high because of how quick the actual flight's going to take. By the way, when we get to Kennebunk, our altitude is going to have to be 2,300 feet. In the old days, of course, we'd have to convert this to meters, but fortunately we actually have an instrument on here that is set to feet. By the way, what is the atmospheric pressure at the moment? Have we actually checked it? We probably should. I'm actually going to use the atmospheric pressure from Portland to save me a trip a little later on. So we're looking at, let's see here, 3014. So I'm going to go ahead and grab out my little phone here, select the converter, do inches mercury, set it to 3014. Okay, so that gets us 1020. So I'm going to go ahead and set all of my instruments. The lazy co-pilot, of course, isn't going to set up any of his instruments. What do we need here? We need 765. 765 is right there. Good, good. Swing over to here. I'm going to go ahead and set that to 1020. We're going to set our altitude, our minimum, to 60 meters, which is about 200 feet. Swinging over onto this side, we're going to go ahead and set our two altimeters here as well. 765, and then we're going to come up to here. And we're going to go ahead and dial in our 1020 as well, and we are in great shape. Of course, normally what we would do is we'd set all this stuff once we get in the air, but we're just going to make it, like I said, as easy on ourselves as we possibly can today. One last kind of mental check, because I don't want to make any mistakes if I can help myself with it. Let's see here. Okay, that looks good, that looks good. All right, I'm happy. Let's go ahead and get going. And away we go. Probably helps if we turn our landing lights on, doesn't it? I'm going to go ahead and set a height warning for 2,000, because that's going to be our altitude for kind of cruising today. And rotate at about 300 kilometers per hour. Looks good. Coming on up. Gonna get some vicious zoomies. We have a positive rate, so our landing gear are going to go ahead and get retracted. You got to be really, really careful with this plane when you do the initial climb out that you don't allow the thing to kind of get out of control because it really likes to nose up, especially when you retract the flaps. All right, all the lights are out on the landing gear, so we go ahead and hit the G again to reset that to the middle position. We're going to go ahead and drop the nose just a little bit and go ahead and bring up our flaps. There we go. We're heading roughly the course. Now notice how much this aircraft would like to pitch itself up. So you really have to compensate with a lot of nose down trim. Our climbing speed is about 465 kilometers an hour. That's the equivalent of about 250-ish. So I'm going to go ahead and set that right now. Activate the course steer button. Now we are looking pretty good. That automatic pilot's trying to kill everybody in the back, but they'll forgive me because they're not going to be able to see anything but clouds in a minute anyway. Ah, there we go. Much better. Sweet. Okay, let's start thinking about what we're going to be doing today. Whoa. Having a little bit of trouble today, Mr. Automatic Pilot. Probably just the wind. Okay. So now that we're heading roughly on the course that we want it to be on, we need to start thinking in advance of all the different good stuff that we're going to have to do. Again, before I do any of that, though, I notice I'm just about up to 2,000 meters. Man, this thing can be a rocket sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and activate the height hold mode in just a second. All right, looks pretty good, looks pretty good. The trick I found for this one, there's the warning, is to actually, you can pause the game right when you get to the altitude you want rather than playing the can I hit the button in time button. Game, I should say. We'll go ahead and reduce the power. I'm only going to need probably about half or so like this. Whoa, good amount of turbulence today, but that's kind of what you'd expect. It's a nice hot summer day at this point. This is X-Plane 11, by the way, and things are looking absolutely gorgeous with the cloud shadows and all that other good stuff. Okay. So now what we're going to do is start thinking about acquiring that VOR station. If I were to actually activate this instrument down here, you can see that the VOR that we're interested in is actually more or less straight ahead. Again, make sure you got the correct frequency here, 117.10. Coming over here, correct frequency is 117.10. So we're going to go ahead and come down to here, press VOR 1, and you're going to see that it's going to start lining us up with that 30-degree radial, which is going to work fairly well for us. This weather's a lot better than they forecasted, but if you guys know anything about weather forecasters, that could be tricky. Okay, so our speed is actually pretty much right on, even though I just kind of guessed how much throttle to use, which is makes me kind of happy in a lot of different ways. I give it just a little bit to keep us up at that 250 point. Good time to double check to make sure everything makes sense. So this instrument's showing that we're at 90 degrees. Coming up here, you can actually see that it has drifted a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and reset that because we really can't be taking any chances with instruments kind of wandering. Being on magnetic correction mode is a great way to build up a lot of error. That's actually what I'm on right now, just because of the way it's set up. I know we are at about 43 degrees. I'm going to set that here. We're going to activate users to reference mode, and we're going to go ahead and set this to magnetic, main, and then just hold it for a second. It's only going to make a little tiny adjustment. Switch these two. Hit that again. Switch to directional gyro mode. Hit that once more. Then go ahead and switch these two again. And we are all set. So now we know that all the instruments are working the way we expect them to be working. Just a moment, we'll be acquiring that lucky radial that we've been looking for a little earlier on, which is going to be, again, kind of handy. Speed is a little too high. Doesn't really have a good automatic throttle, which we're going to be using quite a bit of later. Okay, so as we're acquiring that, let's go ahead and scoot back real fast to this, just to make sure everything's working the way we hope it is. Whoop. Okay. So the aircraft itself, it just took off from this point, and it's basically flying kind of sideways, trying to get over to it. Kind of flying a little bit to the right. We could probably steepen this up a little bit, trying to get to probably somewhere in here where it's actually going to start following that radial. Once we cross the radial, our lucky crossing point on the runway itself is going to be 14 nautical miles, 14.4 nautical miles from this. It's also going to be 10.6 nautical miles from the end of the runway. So we can really use either reference when we're approaching. What I like to do is I like to set up one of my HSIs with the VOR, and the other one of the HSIs with the actual ILS. That way you can actually watch the two needles, see that you're on track with this one, and see the moment that you cross this one. It's just kind of a neat little trick that I use, and I find, again, that it works fairly well. Not too bad today. A little earlier, it was quite a bit more overcast, but again, I'll take what I can get. Kind of a neat little exercise anyway. Speed is just about right, which makes me incredibly happy, because sometimes it can be very difficult to do. Taking a swing on the radar, can't detect any active precipitation at the moment, which makes me also kind of happy. It means it's going to be a slightly more comfortable flight for our passengers today. Right, I'm going to go swing back over to the engineer panel now. Just kind of make sure everything makes sense. Oh, that looks pretty good. I'm actually going to turn up the temperature just a teeny tiny bit to 21. 20 I personally find is a little cold. I know it really doesn't matter, but why not, right? Cabin pressure looks pretty comfortable though, and everything else looks very, very good. Swing back to where we were a second ago. Any moment we're going to start tracking that radial. Just double checking to make sure we have the correct one set here. Make sure we have the correct one set here. Let's take a look. Our wind, by the way, is quite a bit variable, very gusty, and it's coming directly out of, ooh, geez, that's tough to tell. It looks like northeast. This is going to be a navigator's wind, which means it's giving you the wind from the direction, or the direction it's going to, rather. And if you want where the direction's actually coming from, the wind rather, you have to basically add 180 or subtract 180 from this if it's, depending on what it is. So in this particular case, if it's saying 200 minus 180, it's a 20-degree wind. It's basically kind of coming out of this direction. It's coming basically out of this direction. That also means when we go to fly our little hold a little later on, the wind's going to be kind of pushing us this way, which means when we cross, it's actually going to kind of hug us and maybe even flip us back over the line before we get a chance to come back out of our little parallel entry. About 20 nautical miles to go. Just double checking to make sure I'm in the correct mode. One thing I just remembered is you probably want to make sure that you have VOR 2 mode set. Otherwise, this instrument won't actually show you anything, which may actually disappoint you a little bit. Another thing we're going to have to remember later on is to set this up correctly. So when we land, we don't have any issues with crossing and stuff along those lines. Looks like we're just about to start to acquire that radial, and we're going to go ahead and take that left turn over this beautiful, beautiful, lots and lots and lots and lots of trees area. Some very nice lakes, but unfortunately they're usually much too cold to go swimming in unless it's, again, the dead of August or something along those lines. Very, very nice. Our airport's going to be somewhere down in this end, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Pretty hazy, but not getting bounced around too bad, so I'm not too concerned. Okay, so we're going to have to start descending now, because if you guys remember, our altitude we need to be at is going to be at 2,300 feet. We're all the way up here at 6,500 feet-ish. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my throttle back. I'm going to tap the V key. As the aircraft slows down, it'll start nosing itself down on its own. That's probably a little bit too aggressive, so I'm actually going to bring in a little bit more power to reduce the rate of descent. This is basically a flight level change if you're flying like a Boeing airline or something along those lines. So we're going to keep an eye out for, whoa, this thing is all over the place today. We're going to be keeping an eye out for an altitude of about 2,300 feet. Not 2,300 meters, I've done that before too, and that's just embarrassing. Come on, you can do it, Mr. Plane. You can do it. Don't make me take manual control. Alright, we seem to be on our way. Okay, so our first number, 14.4, which we've already crossed. So now what we're going to be keeping an eye out for is the moment that we cross this point right here. So keep in mind, we're still approaching the VOR. So although it was like, oh no, we're already on this line, we're actually still on this line down here at this point. So, be careful, because some of that can get very confusing if you're not really, really paying attention to what you're doing as you're flying. And trying to explain things as you fly, of course, just makes it more exciting. I feel sorry to be a passenger on this thing at this moment. Okay, about 11.5 nautical miles to go. Then we're going to cross, go straight, and then go ahead and enter into that parallel hold. You got a little airport over here on my left. If I'm taking a look at the map right now, I'd say that Sanford Seacoast Regional. It's got kind of a sort of intersecting on the east side as far as the runways are concerned. Looking down here, looks like we have a bonus runway. Are we at the right place or are we not? Yeah, we're at the right place. It's actually unused runway. Kind of cool. Or a taxiway, I should say. Whoa, going up and down. It's going to be a lot more comfortable once we get a little bit lower. At least we hope. Right now, it looks like the clouds aren't too bad, so maybe this wasn't as much of an instrument flight as we thought it was going to be. That's okay. Sometimes it's still fun to practice. Okay, still approaching the VOR station. Kind of getting bounced around pretty hard. There actually is a turbulence button right here. It kind of dampens out the movements of the actual autopilot. I find that to be a little overkill. But at the same time, it can definitely improve the comfort of the passengers if you're not trying to fly things by hand. Just want to take a quick look. Boop. Okay, good. About 6 nautical miles to go. Sometimes in this game, you can actually look out the window and find the exact VOR station you're about to cross. But in this particular case, it looks like it's going to be a little difficult given all the forests down there. Oh well. All right. Keep in mind that this is going to be slant height with the distance measuring equipment. So the fact of the matter is we're still over 3,000 feet up in the air. So that's 2/3 of a mile-ish. So you're going to have to add that kind of. Of course, you have to take the sine of the angle and all that other good stuff to get the exact distance. The short version is you're going to see this number never quite get to 0, even though you're going to pass directly over it. Real pros will actually go ahead and use their heading hold tool to fly over the top of a VOR station so as not to make the plane go like this as it crosses over the top and tries to reacquire the from radial. So I'm going to go ahead and do that too, because it's the right thing to do. All right, there's 3,200 feet, so we have another 1,000 feet or so we have to descend. Getting bumped up pretty good here, but it kind of happens this time of year. It's just going to make our landing much more exciting. Oh, now watch this. It's going to go down, and then it's going to go up without ever hitting 0. Don't make a liar out of me. Watch this do its little dance, too. Whoa! See it? Now watch. It's going to start going up. Oh, there it goes. Okay, now we have to start thinking about the approach phase. So once I get about 2 nautical miles away, I'm going to go ahead and flip back on the VOR hold mode. Looks like we're right about ready to go ahead and activate our height hold mode once we get, like I said, about 2,300 feet or so. Alright, I'm actually going to also turn on speed hold mode, so I don't have to worry about that aspect. Okay, now for the hard part. So we are going to go ahead and find the moment that we cross the localizer on the runway. So we're going to know that we're going to do that one of two ways. First off, you can see that our DME from Kennebunk is going to equal 14.4. Second, we could use the DME, which is actually down here, from the ILS itself, and that would tell us that it would be at 10.6. The last method, and my preferred method, is to wait until the HSI, our little kind of course deviation indicator over here, tells us that we've whipped past the runway. In a minute or so, you're actually going to see this needle shoot to up here. We're going to cross it, it's going to shoot to the right. As soon as we do that, we need to enter into the back course, or our parallel hold. So the back course is going to take us the opposite of 110 degrees. I'll grab a calculator real quick. That's going to get us 290 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and scoot this. Whoa! Just kidding. I'm going to grab this guy and scoot this guy over to 290 degrees. So when we get there, we don't have to worry about that too much. Where were you guys on that? You should have said something. Anyway, altitude's correct. We are getting very, very, very close to the point where we're going to have take that left turn. Watching this guy very carefully. 110. 30, good. So after we take that left turn, we're going to travel about a minute out, then take a left, a big old, almost like the teardrop pattern, and then try to reacquire the waypoint, which is going to be called Buckstow right here. You'll see that in just a moment. Okay. So which one of these two is going to get to the value we want it to be first? I don't know. Note that on this HSI, the course deviation indicator needle has shot to the left, which tells us we're basically to the south of the 110 degree localizer radial. Once this needle crosses here, I'm going to reach down here and mangle the course steer button to go ahead and execute that left turn for that parallel course. We're going to follow that course out, like I said, about a minute. Then we're going to take another left turn and then a big wide left turn and try to reacquire the localizer. It'll make sense when you see it, I promise. This weather's a lot better than it said online, but can't always count on it. This being the X-plane universe, of course, a gigantic cloud could simply appear out of thin air, which is what clouds do, I guess, and cause us all sorts of problems, but it's still kind of a nice exercise. Alright, which one is it going to be? Watch this. It'll say 10.6, this will say 14.4, and this needle will go shooting to the left. Ready, set, wait for it. We're basically exactly tangent. There's the 10.6. See the needle? 14.1, 2, 3, 4. Ta-da! So now we've just crossed over Buckstow, which there's nothing to see here because it's an imaginary waypoint anyway. So we're going to go ahead and take a left turn and fly basically the back course away from the localizer for a minute. Then we're going to take a big circle and then reacquire the front course. That'll take us back into our landing. So this is a great time, of course, to flip over your ILS frequency. 109,900. By the way, make sure you confirm that you're on the correct channel. You can really embarrass yourself if you're not. The stopwatch down here has two stopwatches. You have kind of like a flight timer down here. Then you have kind of like a big-handed, easy-to-read stopwatch over here. Go ahead and switch that to 110 too before I embarrass myself. 110. You could actually reverse the VOR and all that other good stuff, but we don't need to do that right now. Okay, stand by on the stopwatch. Come on, close enough. Okay, so after 1 minute, we're going to go ahead and take our left turn to go ahead and enter into our actual hold. Right now we're flying the parallel course of it. Be careful with this needle, it can really mess your mind up as far as what direction is what right now. We're essentially flying the radial backwards, but that's okay. Okay, while that's going on, we're just going to kind of quickly pay attention to our instruments. We're also going to start to think about our landing approaches. So I'm going to drop ourselves down. Once we enter into the hold, we'll slow down to a kind of like our holding speed, which is going to be about 400 kilometers an hour or so. Alright, we've got about 25 seconds left. The engine's having a fun time. Again, the auto throttle on this wasn't really meant for this. It was basically meant to make it easier for us to do approaches, but yeah. Ooh, looks like there's some dangerous terrain up ahead. Nothing too concerning, of course. Ready, set. Alright, here we go. So we're going to go ahead and take a gigantic left turn and attempt to reacquire the localizer. There's a couple different strategies for doing this. Some people like to do kind of like the, I guess I call it the heading indicator creep. It's kind of a fun method. The other really neat method is you can actually shut off your roll channel and fly this by hand also. But for this demonstration, instead of embarrassing myself with my awful hand flying skills, I just thought I'd do it this way. Now be prepared to be confused. Gonna keep on flying like this. Now, as we pass this 210 degrees, watch what happens to this needle. And this is why you really have to concentrate and think about what you're doing at all times as you're flying these courses. Okay, so notice the needle's coming towards the center even though it's behind us. Watch what happens. And now look which way the needle's going. Oh, mind blown. Now, what we just did is crossed over the localizer, which means we did a pretty good job. So I'm just going to keep my turn up. Then I'm going to go ahead and put myself at about that angle so that I can actually lock back onto that localizer. I don't actually see the localizer, and the weather seems to be a lot better than I expected, but oh well, what are you going to do about it, right? Okay, this is where you're going to get in trouble. Which one of these buttons is going to allow you to go ahead and follow that localizer? I'll leave you in suspense. A pretty wide turn here, but again, we're not going to get to that waypoint Buckstow again until we get to 10.6 nautical miles. So we got plenty of time to figure this out. Ooh, pretty serious aggressive turn here, because this is going to be a big giant circle. Wait until you see what this looks like on the map later on. I think that'll tickle you a little bit. Keep that turn in. This plane does not take standard turns. It takes, I guess I would say, like a minute and a quarter, a minute and a half standard turn. So you have to kind of be aware of that when you're making your turns. Again, flying it by hand would definitely be the safer option, but at the same token, I find this works fairly well, so I'm not complaining too much. Okay, so now we are pointing back at the radial, which is going to be over here somewhere, and we're going to try to line up with it quickly. And then as soon as we get to Buckstow, we're going to enter into our actual holding pattern. Scary. We're also going to slow down when we get to the holding pattern. We don't need to go ripping along with it. I didn't see that coming, did you? Okay, so we've reacquired the localizer. We're not actually going to start our descent until we get a lot closer, but the good news is that we're just going to be using this kind of as a reference at the moment. All right. Again, we're looking for about 10.6 where Buckstow is. Then we're going to go ahead and flip back to course steer mode, and then we're going to enter into a nice right turn. Again, since our right turn is going to be 90 degrees off where we need to be heading, that's going to be a 200-degree turn. It's this 200 degrees. Keep an eye out for 10.6. All right, that's Buckstow. So we're going to go ahead and take our right. Now we're entering into our actual holding pattern. Now, in the ideal world, this turn should take us 1 minute. The straightaway should take us a minute. The return turn should take us a minute, and then getting back to the original waypoint should also take us a minute. Unfortunately, since our autopilot does not take a standard 1-minute turn to travel 180 degrees, we're going to cheat a little bit, but that's perfectly fine. So we're going to go ahead and entering our little hold. If you're curious where we are on the map, we would be at this point right here starting to take this. This is going to be a much wider corner than it shows on the map, but these little tiny holding patterns are really for little tiny planes. So, deal. All right, swinging around here. Time to slow down a little bit. We actually can enter into a holding speed. Holding speed on this plane really depends on weight, but in this particular case, I like to swing it down to about 400. And I'm also going to bring in our first notch of flaps once we get down there. Oh, look at that. It made a liar out of me. Oh, well. So we're going to go ahead and start our hold. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the stopwatch. We're going to go for exactly 1 minute. And then we're going to take our right turn, get us back onto the main radial, and then go ahead and do our landing. All right, let's go ahead and bring in our first notch of flaps. Down they go. Uh-oh. Gonna get all sorts of warning and all that good stuff, and now the plane's gonna try to feel itself out to find the best place to go ahead and get it. Our angle of attack is pretty low, so I'm not too concerned that we're making any crazy mistakes here. All right, about 30 seconds to go in our opposite course. Once again, we get to this point, we're gonna go ahead and execute a right turn and then set ourselves up for landing. 20 seconds. 15. Dun 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 dun. Just kidding. Obviously, we're taking faster turns because we're not going as quick as we were a minute ago. All right. So now we're going to take our right turn and we're going to attempt to acquire the localizer and the glide slope so we can actually go ahead and land this plane. Now, what we could do if we had to fly this hold again is we could fly this out a minute and then take a right turn at 90 degrees and fly it another minute. But the good news is we don't actually have to do that at this point, so I'm not too concerned with it. Okay, I just realized my terrible mistake, and that was the fact that instead of flying 180 degrees, I've only flew 90 degrees. So our actual hold starts right now. Oops. I'm sure the people at Air Traffic Central Control are revoking my license and my ability to make YouTube videos. But at the same time, I recognize the error, and that's kind of the important part anyway. Okay, so now we're going to fly basically a back course away from the runway this time. So you can see our distance is incrementing. This time when we take our 90-degree turn, we're probably going to take it a little on the sharper side, maybe 110 degrees, to try to reacquire that localizer, you know, before I get gray hair. Not that I don't already have it, but that's okay. About 30 seconds to go, and we'll go ahead and take that right turn again. Speed's pretty good. Basically, we turned our strange-looking oval into a strange-looking rounded rectangle, but they'll forgive us, I'm sure. In about 5 seconds. Okie doke. Let's go ahead and find that radial so we can go ahead and land this plane. Now, because of our little oopsie, it's probably going to take about 2 minutes to find that course. Not quite 2 minutes, but something along those lines. Once we get a little bit closer, I'll go ahead and reactivate the approach autopilot. This is the great thing about automatic pilot, is it does exactly what you do, even if you didn't do the right thing, which is just kind of fun. All right, good time to go ahead and get our before landing checklists and all those other good things set up. Our approach speed today is going to be 252 kilometers per hour. Flipping over to the checklist, I'm going to go ahead and skip this part. Whoop. Flip it over. Go ahead and close all those out right now. Before base turn. Oh, that's us. All right. So, spoilers, armed. Stabilizer setting, it already kind of got it because we've been an automatic pilot. Radar altitude setting, we already set at 60 meters, which is basically the equivalent of 200 feet. You'll notice, by the way, since we're flying a little bit closer, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I'm going to come on down here and press the approach button. And away we go. Okay, continuing. Set. So now we are just about established on the localizer. Once this turn finishes up, and we reacquire our lucky localizer here. Distance is going down, which is good. We can go ahead and start getting ready. All right, flaps and slats. We're going to go ahead and get our next notch of flaps. Whoops. Next notch. Let's see, the safe speed for that is going to be 330. We are currently traveling 400, so we need to slow down. We'll get our speed down to about 360. Sounds pretty good. Perfect. Just a minute, we're going to go ahead and acquire the localizer, and the glide slope's going to come a minute later, you'll see. Okay, coming down to 360. Notice I haven't really looked out the window too much today, which is good. Okay, so we're ready for our flaps 28. Good. And we're going to leave it like this until we get a lot closer, otherwise it's going to take us forever to get down onto the ground. We're already only doing 365 kph, so. Definitely going to leave it landing gear. By an interesting coincidence, we're going to end up at the same point that Buxton was by the time we acquire everything. Kind of a neat little way of doing things, but that's fine. Just double checking to make sure everything makes sense down here. Approach, we're on the correct frequency. And the localizer is definitely off to our left a little bit. By the way, the glide slope on this aircraft is indicated by this horizontal yellow line. You can see we're below glide slope, which is exactly where we want to be. All right, we're crossing Buxton almost. But it looks to me, because of our little turn, that we're going to have to actually take it out a little bit further, because we're getting much too close for the runway. That'll do, right there. This is a much more aggressive grab at that particular position. And the reason we're having to do this is because of the little oopsie with the 90 degrees as opposed to the 180. Okay, we're starting to capture the glide slope. Go ahead and activate that. Might as well do some work with that. So we're going to reduce our speed. There we go. Gotcha. Okay, let's go ahead and bring our speed down to our approach speed, which is 252 if you remember. Bring in that next notch of flaps in just a minute.
Закрылки выпускаются синхронно. Стабилизатор перекладывается. Закрылки 36. Стабилизатор -3. Закрылки выпускаются синхронно.
Last notch of flaps, check. Landing gear.
Выпускаю шасси.
Elevator limiters, no warning there. Landing lights, we've already gone ahead and extended those because we never actually put them away. And we are ready to land. Alright, theoretically, if everything has worked out properly today, not that it has, again, watch out for those evil holds, we should be pretty much lined up with the runway at the speed we need to. And looking out my window at the moment, I happen to see the runway exactly like we expected it to be. We're going to go ahead and land at that sucker as well. Looking pretty good, nice and aligned. I can see that we're definitely on glide slope based on the lights at the side. That's your pappy. Close this up, don't need it at the moment. We'll probably take the controls away from the aircraft once we get to, I don't know, probably 80 meters up, or basically whenever it seems appropriate. We're still getting bumped around pretty good by the turbulence, which can be expected given about the heat and the humidity of the day, but we should be pretty fine as far as our landing goes. Watching automatic pilots work. Fun. Of course, you should be keeping an eye out for any traffic. I don't see anything too suspicious. Alright, I'm going to tell my engineer to go ahead and shut off the bleeds to the engines. The reason we do that in this plane is it gives us a slightly quicker response of the engine, at least in the real plane. I don't know if it actually does it in a simulated plane, but, you know, while we're at it, we might as well do it. Okay, the way that I like to disengage the automatic pilot in this plane is I basically give everything a really quick wiggle, and that seems to shut everybody off simultaneously. So we're going to get just a little bit closer before we do that. Whew, hot. Very hot. There we go. That's what happens when you shut off the bleed air. Ah, a little better. You can stick your finger and stuff into those fans. It doesn't hurt. They're pretty cheap plastic. A little high, but that's okay. Speed's almost perfect. Now this aircraft has a really unconventional flare. Because you shut the power off, it actually makes the nose lift up instead of down, like most of the other aircraft you've probably flown before. So you have to kind of be kind of ready for that. All right, manual controls.
200.
It is turbulent today. A little bit of a crosswind, but nothing too serious.
50.
All right, gonna back out the power. The nose up just a little bit. Now you gotta push forward to flare this plane. There we go. Make sure you hold the control stick forward when you go ahead and use your brakes. Otherwise, you're gonna find that the nose of the plane is gonna lift back up and you strike your tail. You did it. Okay, hopefully you guys enjoy this tutorial. We had a little bit of an oopsie in the middle there, but I think everything turned out pretty well in the end, so I'm not complaining too much. We did get to our destination with only slight back injuries and neck injuries on the landing, but nothing too concerning. If we want to, we're actually going to quickly take a look at our map and see what we've done here. You can see just like we planned, went here, entered into that delightful parallel course, spun around, reacquired that localizer, turned 90 degrees instead of 180, realized our mistake, took it, and then took this really awful little guy. What we really should have done is taken this line here and taken it all the way back and then flown in, but things worked out pretty well in the end. Alright, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Later.